This happened back in the summer of 2017. I had just gotten laid off from my first decent job out of college, writing for this local firm out in the suburbs, which sucked, but I was trying to make the most of it. I live in a mid-sized city by one of the Great Lakes, just a few blocks from the shoreline. My girlfriend Julia and I share a small one-bedroom apartment with our two ridiculous cats who think they own the place. We don't make a lot, but between her gig at a local chocolate shop and me doing food deliveries, we manage to get by and still treat ourselves every now and then. Anyway, on one of those days after losing the job, I drove out to this little circular parking spot by the lake to chill, clear my head, and pretend to be productive by half watching the Comey hearings on my phone while occasionally scrolling through job listings. I was just about to head home when I noticed this sky blue Hyundai pull into the lot. At first, I didn't think much of it, but then I caught the driver, some middle-aged dude, just staring at me. Like, not just a glance, but dead-on eye contact that didn't break even when I looked back. A little creepy, but I figured, whatever. Maybe I just caught him in a weird moment. But as I drove off and started heading back, I realized he had pulled out of the lot too and was following me. At first, I tried to play it off like it had to be a coincidence. But then I took a few weird side streets, like intentionally weird. And every single time I looked in my mirror, there he was, still behind me. Not close enough to tailgate, but definitely keeping pace. Now I'm not exactly built like The Rock, and while I can hold my own, I'm not trying to get into a situation that could go south. So I decided to pull into a gas station. I figured, if he followed me in there, then I'd know for sure it wasn't in my head. Sure enough, he did. Parked at the pump right next to mine. I cracked my window just enough and shouted, "Hey man, you need something? You've been behind me for like 20 minutes. He gave me this look. His face was sunken, tired looking, almost like someone who hadn't slept in days. And he just said, "No, you're not her." Then he floored it out of there, tires screeching. I was stunned, confused, angry even. I ended up calling the non-emergency police line, and they had me meet with a park officer back where it all started. While I was waiting in the lot, flipping through my phone, guess who rolled through again? That same Hyundai. Did a slow circle and pulled out. That was enough for me. I pointed him out the second the officer arrived. They actually managed to stop him and talk. After about 10 minutes, the officer comes back and tells me the guy claimed I was acting suspicious, like he thought I was a threat or something. Honestly, it was laughable. The officer told me they were familiar with the guy, though he didn't go into detail. All I know is the guy was apparently shaking and wanted to apologize by the time the cop walked him home. He got officially banned from the park. Julia and I thought that would be the end of it. Around 2 a.m., we were out on our balcony, 3rd floor, just relaxing with a couple of beers and cigarettes. Then I noticed this car parked down the street, engine still running. I couldn't be 100% sure, but I swore it looked like the same Hyundai from earlier. Julia had already heard the story, so when I gestured subtly toward the car, she caught on immediately. I checked the partial plate I'd saved in my notes and sure enough, matched up. I called the cops again. As I was on the phone with dispatch, the car slowly drove away. A couple units came by shortly after, but they couldn't find him. Nothing happened that night, but every door and window in that apartment got checked at least 3 times before bed. Weeks passed, and honestly, we kind of moved on. Until one random night, Julia and I ran to the corner gas station for some snacks and drinks. I stayed inside while she waited in the car. When I came back out, there he was again, parked just a few feet away. That same damn Hyundai. And this time, he was staring straight at her. I locked eyes with him, just to make it clear I saw him. He didn't flinch, just stared. I got in the car and told Julia what was up. We drove off, taking random turns, trying to see if he was tailing us. We called the police again, but once more they weren't able to track him down. Later we found out from the rangers that this guy had a habit of following women around the park, especially the ones with headphones on, jogging or walking alone. Apparently my girlfriend fit his type. The incident with me had been the final straw, and that's why they banned him for good. Looking back, we figure he must have seen Julia in my car at some point, thought she was someone else, and then started following me thinking I was her. It's the only thing that really makes sense. Police said to call if we ever saw him again. Thankfully, we haven't. So this happened back in 2008 when I was doing night classes at CALC in Toronto. It's right around Broadview and Danforth. One day I showed up to class way too early, like almost 40 minutes before it started, so I figured I'd wander off and chill for a bit. I had this little joint in my jacket, so I thought, why not kill time and unwind? There's this bridge behind the school that goes over the highway, and if you cross it, it leads to this trail heading toward Riverdale Park. That park's kind of famous, especially if you're from Toronto. Tons of music videos shoot skyline scenes there. Anyway, I took one of the side paths off the main trail and found a nice little hidden spot to spark up. I had just lit the joint and was taking a few hits when I noticed this older Asian guy, probably late 50s or early 60s, coming down the same trail toward me. He had this little grocery bag in his hand and gave me a friendly nod. I smiled back because, at the time, I was one of those be nice to everyone types, especially if they seemed chill. But as soon as he got close, something about him just gave me weird vibes. So I decided to walk off and find a new spot to finish my smoke. At first I thought it was nothing, but after a few turns down random trails, I realized this guy was still behind me. I even looped around in a literal circle at one point, thinking he'd peel off or that maybe I was just being paranoid. Nope. He kept right on my heels, and I started noticing him messing around with whatever he had in that grocery bag. It wasn't subtle. He kept fiddling with it like he was trying to keep something hidden but ready. At this point, I wasn't high. I was on edge. I made my way back to the main trail since there were other people around. It was summer, early evening, still light out, and this guy was still trailing me. He eventually started acting like he was just admiring flowers or something random, so I took that as my chance to dip and finish my joint farther into the park. Even then, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. It didn't make sense, though. I was 18, built, covered in tattoos, boots, full punk getup. If he was some kind of creep, why would he follow me when there were women walking alone with headphones in? It crossed my mind that maybe he was a cop, or just a weird dude with a strange reason for tailing me. Once I was done, I started heading back towards school, and he starts following me again. I sped up a bit, and so did he. I slowed down, same thing. At one point, I stopped to tighten my combat boots, just in case I had to throw hands or run, and he straight up stopped too. By the time we reached the little pedestrian bridge again, I noticed a couple of joggers taking a break. I quickly walked up to them and quietly explained the situation like, "Hey, can you pretend to know me?" They caught on right away and played along, and the guy finally ducked into the trees. I kept walking, figuring that was it. Crisis averted. I got about 75 to 100 meters down the path behind the school, and the guy was nowhere in sight. I looked back a few times just to be sure, then finally popped in my earbuds and tried to chill with some music. But barely 30 seconds in, my girlfriend called and the music cut off, and that's when I heard quick footsteps behind me. I spun around and the guy was literally just 5 feet away from me. He'd somehow caught up that fast and was completely silent about it. I bolted up the stairs to where one of my classmates, Warren, was standing. I tossed off my bag and jacket, ready for a fight if it came to that. The guy walked past us slowly, heading toward the Danforth, never taking his eyes off me. Then, out of nowhere, he circled back and stopped just a few feet away, looking straight at me. That smile he gave me, I still feel sick thinking about it. It wasn't friendly. It was like he was silently telling me, "You got lucky." He still had that damn grocery bag and was gripping something inside it. A few seconds later, he turned and disappeared behind the school. I told the school staff about everything, just in case this dude started creeping around other students. My mom, trying to make me feel better in the only way she knew how. Cracked a dark joke about how Jeffrey Dahmer also had a thing for young, fit guys. That night I didn't see him again, and for a while, it seemed like that was the end of it. But about 2 weeks later, I'm reading the paper and guess who shows up in the crime section? That same guy. He'd been arrested for, and I'm not joking, masturbating on the subway while holding a woman at knife point. And get this, he was wearing the exact same shirt in his mugshot as he was when he was following me. I've always had this weird fear, like an actual phobia, about being watched. There's a name for it, a few actually. Scopophobia, ophthalmophobia, whatever. Basically, I get super uneasy whenever I look at a door that's slightly cracked open, a dark window at night, or even just a weird corner in the room. My mind instantly goes to imagining someone, just a face, quietly staring back at me. I don't know why I do it, but my brain fills in the blanks with the creepiest possible scenario. And well, now I kind of know where it all came from. Anyway, back in the summer of 2016, I was living in this small but cozy apartment with my mom. It wasn't anything fancy, just a one-floor place, no attic or basement, but my bedroom had this tiny crawl space in the closet. Like one of those weird little doors in the floor you don't think twice about unless you're watching a horror movie. I never opened it. Ever. Most people might have gotten curious, but I was like, nope. There's definitely either something dead or something waiting down there, and I wasn't about to find out which. At first, everything was fine. We were just living life, totally normal stuff. Then, maybe a month or two in, I started hearing noises at night. Nothing too crazy, just the occasional scratching or bumping behind the walls. My mom just laughed it off and said it was probably rats. And honestly, I kind of agreed. As long as they stayed inside the walls and didn't come into my room, I figured we could coexist. Eventually, those sounds just became background noise, like the creaks of an old house. I even found them kind of comforting. That is, until one night when I woke up around 3 a.m. to this soft rolling sound. It was super faint, but it sounded exactly like the closet door sliding open, like the one in my room. I squinted in the dark, but I couldn't really make out anything. Maybe I saw movement. Maybe I didn't. I tried to tell myself I was just being paranoid. But then I turned on my lamp. I honestly still get chills thinking about that moment. I thought I'd see some coats or maybe a shoe I forgot I had. But what I saw, it was a human eye. No, not just the eye. It was half of a man's face, barely peeking out through the tiny crack in the closet door. And he wasn't scared. He didn't flinch. He was just watching me, dead still, like he was studying my every move. I froze. I couldn't scream, couldn't even think straight. My body just locked up. I think I started crying without even realizing it. And I tried to say something, maybe ask what he wanted, but the words didn't come out right. Then he opened the door a little wider, and I saw all of him. I won't even describe what he looked like because I've spent years trying to forget his face. And honestly, I don't want to give it life again by writing it out. But then he said, "Shh." That was it. That single whisper made it real. I couldn't pretend I was dreaming anymore. I scrambled out of bed and ran, straight down the hall and into my mom's room. I couldn't even explain right away. I was just sobbing and shaking. She was half asleep but called the cops anyway. By the time they showed up, he was gone, just vanished. But the crawl space in my closet, still open. The cops checked it out and said it looked like someone had been living in there. I didn't go anywhere near it, but they told us there were tally marks scratched into the walls inside. They didn't say how many. I didn't ask. I didn't want to know if he was counting days or me. All I knew was we needed to get the hell out of that apartment, and fast. They never officially caught him. There was some homeless guy they picked up later who kind of matched the description, but he wasn't talking, and I don't think the cops really pushed the issue. They seemed to think he'd just heard my name through the walls or something, like that explained everything. But that guy, the one in my closet, he said my name like he knew me, like we were old friends. I'll never forget that. Since then, I still see his face sometimes. Not the full thing, just flashes. The eye, the mouth, the lips as they shushed me. It's distorted now, kind of blurred in my mind, but the feeling is the same. He's the reason I can't walk past a half-open door without feeling sick. And yeah, turns out, we didn't have rats after all. Last year I had this gig at an amusement park. Not technically with the park itself, but through this artsy vendor company that had a little dress-up photo booth spot inside. I was 18 at the time, and one of the older people on the team. Most of my co-workers were still juggling high school. My job was to help guests dress up in old-time costumes and take those cheesy, vintage-style photos. It was actually one of the most fun jobs I'd had in a while. We kicked off in the spring, and once summer started rolling in, I was working full-time hours during the week, while most of the crew only came in on weekends. The weekdays were super quiet though, just me in the booth all day. Sometimes I'd walk over to a co-worker's kiosk across the path, just to have someone to talk to for a few minutes. That's when I first noticed this one guy. He'd pass by slowly, like really slowly, just staring right at me the whole time. At first I figured he might be nervous or awkward, and just didn't know how to ask about the pictures, but there was something about the way he looked at me that made me uneasy. Still, I shrugged it off. I mean, I was working in a public place and he hadn't done anything technically wrong. One day, I made the mistake of smiling and waving at him, thinking maybe it would break the ice. Bad call. He practically rushed over and just stood in front of me staring. Finally, he asked about prices. I gave him the usual rundown, keeping things professional. But as I finished, he gave me the creepiest smile. Like not just awkward or weird, but skin-crawling, unsettling. Then he leaned in, way too close, and asked how much it would be for him, like the normal prices didn't apply to him somehow. I clarified that discounts were only for employees, but he didn't push it. He just kind of slinked off. A family had come over by then, so I ushered them in, grateful for the distraction. While I was wrapping up with them, I saw him again. He was standing right outside the little chain fence that bordered the shop, watching everything. When the family left, he tried to follow them into the shop, and I had to block him, saying we only let in paying customers. He looked annoyed but eventually walked away. I thought maybe that would be the end of it, but I was so wrong. As the day wound down, I had to stand outside again, park policy, and I saw him across the way, hiding behind a game booth and peeking around to watch me. He did that every day for the rest of the week, just lurking and staring. I tried to act like I didn't see him, but that just seemed to bother him more. Then Friday came. The park had just opened, and I was outside setting up props when I noticed him walking straight toward me. My stomach flipped. I dropped everything and darted into the booth, latching the chain shut. He stood outside pacing, muttering to himself, and throwing me these manic glances. I was on the verge of grabbing the phone to call security when he suddenly lunged forward, grabbing the chain like he was going to rip it off. His eyes were wide, that same gross smile was back, and he started whispering the most disturbing stuff. I mean, it was sexual and violent and absolutely deranged. He said he loved me and wanted me to dress him up and humiliate him in front of everyone. I was frozen in the back of the shop, trying to keep calm, but I finally shouted at him to leave, or I was calling security. That's when he said something that'll probably haunt me forever. Meet me at the employee exit when you're off, or else. And then he just walked away. I broke down after that, full-on sobbing. I'd never been that scared in my life. When I told my manager later, he looked horrified that I hadn't spoken up sooner. He had security escort me out the back that night, and the next morning, I met with the security team and described the guy. Not even 5 minutes after I got back to my booth with 2 co-workers, the creep showed up again. His face was angry this time, like really pissed. I ducked into the back and finally told my co-workers what was going on. They stuck with me the whole shift and wouldn't let me be alone, even after their hours were up. Security upped their game after that. First, they had uniformed guards nearby, but he kept vanishing whenever they showed. So they switched tactics and had a plainclothes officer pose as a customer across from my booth. I felt like bait, but I didn't even care. I just wanted him gone. And finally, it worked. He showed up again and they arrested him on the spot as he walked toward me. I couldn't even hold it together. I just started crying while the officer tried to comfort me. Turns out they banned him from every Six Flags in the country and revoked his membership. But since he hadn't actually physically attacked me, they had to let him go. That night, I saw him walking along the road as I drove home, and I hit the gas so fast I probably broke a few laws. I was terrified he'd follow me. A few weeks later, a friend in security told me he'd been arrested in a nearby town for public indecency and some other charges. I looked up the records, and yep, it was him. I know this probably doesn't sound as dramatic as some horror stories out there, but that week felt like something out of a nightmare. I honestly never thought anything like this would happen to me. So yeah, if there's anything I learned, it's to never ignore your gut. Always tell someone when something feels off, and pay attention to who's hanging around, even in public places. Alright, so this weird and creepy story happened back when I was about 12 or 13, sometime around the early 2000s. I was with my Boy Scout troop on one of our usual weekend camping trips, and this time we were out near Clinton Lake in Kansas. I'd been on a bunch of campouts before, but this was the last one I clearly remember going on before my family moved to a different state. We rolled in on a rainy Friday evening, the kind of cold drizzle that makes setting up tents a nightmare. But the next day turned out beautiful. Clear skies, sunny, perfect hiking weather. Right before we left for our day hike that morning, this beat-up old van pulled into a site nearby. It looked like something out of a 70s road trip movie. A bunch of guys spilled out, totally embracing the hippie lifestyle. Tie-dye shirts, long hair, bongos, and the smell of something definitely not a campfire. A few of us asked if a skunk was around, but the adults just chuckled, and one of them, I think, went over to tell them to chill with the drugs around a bunch of middle schoolers. We went on our hike and came back a few hours later to find them still there, completely out of it. They were trying to play music, but it sounded like garbage, like they were too high to even strum properly. But then, things got really strange as the sun started going down. The hippie get-ups disappeared, and suddenly they looked like they'd walked out of a Marilyn Manson concert. Trench coats, pale makeup, black everything. And instead of their lazy jam sessions, there was loud grunge metal blaring from what I guess was a speaker hidden somewhere in their camp. That night after dinner, we decided to play capture the flag in this open area not too far from their site. We were careful not to shine flashlights so we could sneak around better, but that also gave us a better view of their site from a new angle. By now, the music had shifted again, this time to something straight up unnerving. I'm talking eerie, dramatic opera music echoing through the woods. I got curious and crept closer to their site. Not too close, but just enough to get a better look. Their campfire had become this massive, out-of-control blaze, way bigger than any fire regulations would allow. And then I saw it. On a tree nearby, something was hanging from a branch. At first I thought I was just seeing things. Maybe they hung up some weird prop or were still tripping. So I shrugged it off and went back to the game. We only played for a short while before heading to our tents. That's when things took a serious turn. Sometime in the middle of the night, our troop leaders woke all of us up and told us to quietly pack our things and take down our tents immediately. No questions, no delays. Everyone was confused, but you could tell from their tone that this wasn't a drill. We quickly got everything loaded onto the bus, while noticing that the giant bonfire was still raging over at the goth camp. But the music had stopped. Instead, we could hear voices, not like casual chatting, but low, weird murmurs, almost like chanting or something. I couldn't make out any words, but it put all of us on edge. Once we were on the bus, the leaders didn't say a word. They just looked tense. The scouts all moved to the back of the bus, whispering among ourselves. One of the guys from the other Capture the Flag team pulled me aside and said he'd also gone to check out that campsite earlier, and what he saw matched what I'd seen. But he got even closer. And what he saw, I still don't like thinking about it. Hanging from the tree was what looked like a dead dog with its head cut off, and next to it, 2 human legs, severed at the thigh. He swore they were real. After that, I understood why the adults rushed us out of there like that. We never found out exactly what happened that night. None of the leaders ever followed up with us, and I've never seen anything about it in the news. But I've never forgotten that trip, and I haven't camped near Clinton Lake since. It was the summer after 5th grade, somewhere around late June. My mom, grandma, and I had spent the morning hitting up garage sales in a nearby town. Kind of a weekend ritual we did whenever the weather was nice. Most of the sales we stopped at were pretty typical, with old kitchen stuff, worn-out books, and the occasional lucky find. By the end of the day, we ended up in this quiet residential area on the edge of town, the kind with freshly mowed lawns, copy-paste houses, and mostly older folks living there. My mom and grandma were chatting with one of the sellers down the street, so I walked a little ahead to check out another house that looked like it had a sale going on. The garage door was up, and a few folding tables were laid out with random household items. There wasn't a sign or balloons or anything flashy, but a man was sitting at the back of the garage in a lawn chair, so I figured it was open to the public. I walked in cautiously, just browsing. The stuff looked like leftovers from someone cleaning out a spare bedroom. An old toaster, a couple of throw blankets, and racks of large women's clothes. Nothing that really screamed kid-friendly, and oddly, no signs that a man lived there at all. Still, I figured maybe he was just helping someone else run the sale. The guy watching over the place looked to be in his early 40s. He had a bit of an unsettling presence, thinning hair around the edges of his head, a thick mustache, and those short jean shorts that haven't been in style since the 90s. He wore a faded t-shirt with a wolf on it, and kept shifting around in his chair, crossing and uncrossing his legs like he was bored or anxious. He didn't say anything at first, just kept smiling a little too long while I browsed. One of the tables had a huge bin of old dolls, mostly Barbies, completely unclothed. I got curious and crouched down to look through them, but almost instantly I regretted it. The doll's hair was stiff, sticky, and had a weird residue on it, like someone had dumped craft glue all over them. And the smell? It hit me like a wall. It was sour and musty, like something had gone bad and never got cleaned up. It honestly made me feel kind of nauseous. While I was still near the bin, the guy finally spoke up. He asked how old I was and where I went to school. Then he asked if I liked Barbies, which felt strange given the condition they were in. I mumbled something about just looking, trying to be polite, and started inching toward the exit. That's when he started talking about his dog, a Cocker Spaniel, I think. And right on cue, the dog began scratching at the inside garage door. He let the dog out, but the weirdest part was that the moment it saw him, it growled, full-on growled, like it was scared or angry. Then it bolted around the house and disappeared into the backyard. I remember thinking that if a dog acts like that toward its own owner, something's not right. I decided I'd had enough and told the guy I was heading out. He sounded a little disappointed when he said, "Oh, already?" But I just gave a quick wave and walked away without looking back. I caught up with my mom and grandma a couple houses down and didn't say much about what had just happened. I just told them the place had junky stuff they wouldn't care about. For a while, I honestly thought I was just being overly sensitive or letting my imagination get the best of me. But about a week later, we were watching the evening news, and a story came on that made my stomach twist. Police had arrested a man for breaking into a woman's house, dressing up in her clothes, and harming someone in the household. The shocking part? He had apparently held a garage sale at the victim's house while all of this was going on. And guess where it happened? That same quiet neighborhood we'd visited. I can't say for sure if it was the same house. Maybe it wasn't. But to this day, I remember the weird smile, the dog's reaction, and the way those Barbies smelled like something truly wrong had happened there.